Before we begin, take a breath, a full, deep breath in, and let it go slowly. This is your time. You've entered a space of stillness, one that doesn't ask you to be anything but present. You don't need to believe in anything. You don't need to fix anything. Just listen. Over the next 1 hour, we'll walk together through 10 of the most profound stories from the Buddhist tradition. Some of them are ancient, passed from teacher to student for generations. Others are short parables, deceptively simple, yet deeply transformative. All of them hold something timeless, something the world today desperately needs: clarity, compassion, and peace. This isn't just a storytelling session. It's a spiritual journey. Through wisdom and metaphor, through suffering and insight, through the everyday and the eternal. These are not fairy tales. They are mirrors. Each story reflects something in us: our fear, our desire, our habits, our blind spots, and most importantly, our capacity to wake up. The Buddha taught not through commandments, but through questions, paradoxes, and stories that gently unravel the ego. His teachings don't shout, they whisper. And when we listen deeply, they awaken something quiet and powerful within us: awareness. Throughout this podcast, after each story, I'll offer not just a reflection, but also a practical invitation, a way to live the teaching in your daily life, whether you're sitting in traffic, walking in nature, or simply lying in bed listening. This is your sangha, your retreat, your temple in sound. You don't have to be a Buddhist to benefit. These stories aren't about religion. They're about the human condition. They're about how we suffer, how we seek peace, how we cling, and how we let go. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to? What pain are you carrying quietly? What truth are you ready to hear? Each story is an open door. You don't have to rush through. Just step in, let it sit with you. Let it stir what's ready to change. You may notice a shift, not just in your mind, but in how you feel inside your body. A softening, a remembering, a quiet knowing that maybe there's another way to live, one with less resistance, less noise, and more presence. We'll begin with a story about impermanence, about how everything we love is already slipping through our fingers. But that's not meant to scare you. It's meant to free you. Because when you truly understand impermanence, not just with your head, but with your heart, you stop clinging, you stop running, and you begin to truly live. So, take another breath, and when you're ready, we'll begin. Story 1. The Broken Cup. A lesson on impermanence. Let me tell you a story. A simple one. But if you truly understand it, it might change the way you see everything. A long time ago, a student came to a Zen master and asked, "Master, how can I live peacefully when everything in life is so fragile?" The master didn't answer directly. Instead, he poured some tea into a delicate porcelain cup. He held it in his hand, admired it briefly, and then smiled. "This cup," he said softly, "is already broken." The student frowned, confused. The cup was perfectly intact, not a single crack. "But master," he said, "the cup is not broken." And the master replied, "To me it is, because I know that one day it will fall, or be dropped, or fade. And when that day comes, I will not mourn. I have already accepted its fate, and because of that, I can enjoy it fully, right now." That story is less than 100 words long, but let it sink in. Everything you love, your home, your favorite mug, your body, your partner, your parents, even your children, they are all like the cup. Beautiful, precious, and already broken. Not in a tragic way, but in a natural, inevitable, and deeply truthful way. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent. That includes your thoughts, your emotions, your successes, and your failures, the car you drive, the face you see in the mirror. Even this moment, right now, it's already gone. And yet, we live like everything will last forever. We cling to what we love, trying to freeze it in time. We avoid what we fear, hoping it will disappear. But all of it, the pleasure, the pain, the gain, the loss, is temporary. That's the first arrow of suffering, our attachment to permanence. We want our relationships to always feel fresh, our bodies to always feel strong, our jobs to always feel meaningful, our friends to always understand us. But life doesn't work that way. It never has. A flower doesn't bloom forever. A wave rises and crashes. Even the stars will one day burn out. So why do we resist what is so obviously true? Because we fear letting go. Because we think that if we accept impermanence, we'll lose our joy. But the opposite is true. When we embrace impermanence, not just intellectually, but with our whole heart, we stop trying to possess life. We start to participate in it. We learn to love without clinging, to experience beauty without needing it to stay, to sit with pain without needing it to vanish. Think of a sunset. It's beautiful because it ends. You don't try to hold it. You simply watch and feel and let it pass. That's how we're meant to live, fully alive in each breath, not because it lasts, but because it doesn't. The Zen master enjoyed the cup more because he knew it would break. He drank from it with gratitude, not greed. He saw the moment for what it was, a gift, not a possession. That's what we forget. We try to turn people into possessions, moments into memories, and we miss the very life that's happening right now. So how do we practice this in our own lives? We start small. We look at something we love, a photograph, a chair, a tree outside our window, and we say quietly, "This will one day be gone." And then we appreciate it more deeply. We don't say it with fear, we say it with reverence. You can do this with anything. The next time you hug someone, tell yourself, this might be the last time, not to be morbid, but to be awake, because one day it will be. And when that day comes, the only question will be, did I truly feel it while it was here? Did I show up for it fully, or did I sleepwalk through it, assuming there would always be more? Impermanence isn't something to be feared, it's something to be honored. It's the very reason anything matters. If life were endless, would you really value this moment? Would you really cherish the sound of laughter, the taste of tea, the warmth of sunlight on your skin? No. It is the fleeting nature of things that gives them meaning. In Tibetan Buddhism, monks spend days creating intricate mandalas out of colored sand, each grain placed with immense care. And then, once the mandala is complete, they destroy it. They sweep it away. Why? To remind themselves and us that nothing lasts, not even beauty, not even this. And so we return to the cup, still intact, still whole, but already broken and somehow more beautiful because of it. Here's a simple invitation. Take one item you use every day, your coffee mug, your phone, your pen, and treat it as if it were already gone. For just one day. Handle it with care. Notice how it feels in your hands. Notice its texture, its weight, its purpose. And at the end of the day, set it down gently with gratitude. You may be surprised at how different it feels. You didn't change the object. You changed your awareness. And that awareness is everything. Story 2. The Snake in the Tube. A lesson on perception and fear. There's an old story from India, a simple tale, but one that reveals a deep truth about the way our minds work. One evening, a man was walking along a dusty path at the edge of a village. The sun had just set, and the shadows of twilight were beginning to stretch across the land. As he turned a corner near the edge of the forest, he froze. Right in front of him, lying across the trail, was a snake. Long, coiled, still. He stumbled back, heart pounding. Fear gripped his chest like a vice. He couldn't breathe. He didn't move. His mind raced. Should I run? Should I yell for help? What if it strikes? He stood there for what felt like forever, paralyzed. But as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he looked again. The snake was not a snake at all. It was a piece of rope. Just an old, frayed rope lying across the path. No threat, no danger, nothing to fear. He laughed in relief, but he also realized something deeper. The fear, the racing heart, the panic. It all came from his mind. He thought it was a snake, and so his body reacted as if it were. But the fear wasn't based on reality. It was based on a misperception, an illusion, a mistake. This story is told in many Buddhist traditions, and the lesson is always the same. What you think is the problem often isn't. It's the way you see it that creates the suffering. In the Buddha's teachings, this is known as avidya, ignorance, or more precisely, misseeing. We don't suffer because of life itself. We suffer because of the stories we tell ourselves about life. We mistake a rope for a snake, and we react with fear, anger, or despair. How many times have you done this in your own life? You get a text from someone, and they don't respond for hours. And your mind starts spinning. Did I offend them? Are they mad at me? Are they ghosting me? And maybe they were just taking a nap. You're walking into a room and someone doesn't smile at you. You assume they don't like you, but maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they didn't even see you. You get rejected from a job or a relationship ends, and you spiral into stories of not being good enough, not being worthy, not being lovable. But maybe that wasn't the truth. Maybe it wasn't even about you. You see, the snake shows up everywhere. In your fears, in your judgments, in the way you interpret other people's words, tone, silence, or actions. And every time you mistake the rope for a snake, you suffer. Not because of the thing itself, but because of how your mind labels it. This is what the Buddha meant when he said, "With our thoughts, we make Thai." Now, this doesn't mean danger doesn't exist. There are real snakes in life. Pain is real. Trauma is real. But what makes the pain last, what magnifies it, is the way we cling to our interpretation. We identify with the fear. We become the story. And once we believe the story, it becomes our reality. There's a Tibetan saying, "Don't believe everything you think." And that might be one of the most liberating teachings of all, because when you stop trusting every thought that arises, you create space to question, to breathe, to look again. Like the man on the path, you pause. You ask, is this really a snake? Or is it a rope? That simple question can transform your entire experience, because it shifts you from reaction to awareness, from fear to presence, from illusion to clarity. In mindfulness practice, we learn to observe the mind without getting caught in it. Thoughts arise, sensations arise, emotions arise, but you don't have to chase them. You don't have to believe the first story that appears. Instead, you become the observer, calm, open, curious. You look again. This is especially important when dealing with fear, because fear is not always a sign of danger. Sometimes fear is just a signal that your nervous system needs attention, that your mind is running ahead, that your inner child needs soothing. When we live in a reactive state, always flinching at every snake we imagine, we never find peace. But when we slow down, when we see clearly, peace becomes possible, even in the midst of chaos. So what's the takeaway here? It's simple. Learn to look again. When you feel overwhelmed, pause. When you feel afraid, pause. When you feel like reacting, pause. And ask yourself, is this really what I think it is? Or am I seeing a snake where there is only a rope? You may find, more often than not, that the world is less threatening than it appears, that your mind is not always a reliable narrator, and that freedom begins the moment you stop believing every thought. Here's something you can try today. Choose one small situation that's bothering you. Something recent. Instead of reacting, sit with it. Breathe. Notice the thoughts that arise around it. Write them down if you'd like, then ask, is this a fact or is it a fear? Is this a snake or just a rope? That single act of inquiry, that one breath between thought and reaction, can change your life, because sometimes the difference between fear and peace is just a second look. Story 3: The Finger and the Moon. A lesson on not mistaking the path for the goal. Let me offer you a riddle. If someone points to the moon, do you look at their finger or do you look at the moon? It seems obvious, right? And yet when it comes to our inner life, we often forget. We get so caught up in the pointing finger, the book, the teacher, the method, the ritual, that we miss the very thing it was pointing to. We mistake the path for the destination. There's a well-known Buddhist saying, the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. But what does that really mean? Let's return to a familiar scene. A master is sitting beneath a tree. A student approaches and asks, "Master, what is enlightenment?" The master says nothing. Instead, he lifts his arm and points to the full moon rising above the mountains. The student looks at the finger. He studies it. He wonders what's so special about this gesture. He begins practicing the same pointing gesture every night. He even teaches others to do the same. But the moon, the actual truth, is never seen. The student becomes a master of form, but not of insight. This is not just a clever parable. It's a mirror for how many of us engage with spiritual life. We confuse the symbol with the meaning. We cling to the words instead of embodying the wisdom. We worship the raft that helped us cross the river instead of walking freely on the other shore. Think about how often this happens. People argue over scriptures, techniques, labels. They divide over traditions, lineages, robes, rituals. They defend their method as the one true way. But in doing so, they may miss the actual freedom the teachings were meant to lead them toward. It's like walking into a restaurant, reading the menu, and thinking you've eaten. The words are not the meal. The practice is not the awakening. It's only the door. You still have to walk through it. This isn't just a spiritual problem, it's a human one. We mistake appearance for essence. We confuse the container for the content. In Buddhism, the teachings are often called upaya, or skillful means. That means every teaching, every story, every meditation, even every ritual is a tool, a vehicle, a bridge to help you cross from confusion to clarity, from suffering to stillness. But here's the catch. Once the tool has served its purpose, you let it go. You don't carry the raft once you've crossed the river. You don't cling to the map once you've arrived. You don't worship the medicine once the illness has passed. Yet many of us do. We become attached to the form. We chant without understanding. We bow without presence. We sit in meditation but stare at the clock, waiting for it to end. The Buddha foresaw this. He warned his disciples not to cling even to his words. He once said, "My teaching is like a finger pointing to the moon. Don't mistake the finger for the moon." He knew the danger is not in the finger. The danger is in forgetting to look beyond it. So what is the moon? It's presence. It's direct experience. It's the stillness within you that no teaching can give, but all teachings can guide you toward. A good teacher is like a lantern, but the light you follow is not theirs. It's your own. This story is not telling you to abandon the path. Far from it. It's reminding you that the path is a means, not an end, and it's your responsibility to stay awake. Not just to what is said, but to what is meant. There's a saying in Zen, when the mouth opens to speak of truth, it already begins to lie. Because words can never fully capture the living experience of awakening. They can only point, they can only suggest. The rest is up to you. So here's the shift. Instead of obsessing over the method, ask yourself what it's helping you touch. Are you becoming more present, more open, more compassionate, less reactive? If not, maybe you've started staring at the finger again. This applies to every aspect of life, not just spiritual practice. We get lost in labels, titles, roles, certifications, but none of those are the essence. None of those are you. You are not your job, your degree, your identity, or your tradition. You are the awareness behind all of that. And every true teaching, whether from Buddhism or elsewhere, is trying to lead you back to that place. The place where the moon shines quietly, needing no name. Here's a small practice for the days ahead. Notice where in your life you might be clinging to form over essence. Are there rituals you perform out of habit but without intention? Are there teachings you believe in but haven't actually experienced for yourself? Try letting go of the structure just for a moment and ask, what is this pointing me toward? What's the moon behind this finger? Then sit quietly and listen, not with your mind, but with your whole being. Story 4. The Woman at the River, a lesson on letting go of the past. Let's begin with a classic Zen tale. Two monks were traveling together, one older, seasoned, and calm, the other younger, eager, and new to the path. As they walked through the countryside, they reached a river swollen from recent rains. On the edge of the riverbank stood a young woman in a silk kimono, clearly distressed. She couldn't cross the water without ruining her clothes. Without hesitation, the older monk walked over, bowed respectfully, and gently lifted her onto his back. He carried her across the river, placed her down safely on the other side, and the two monks continued their journey in silence. For the next few hours, the younger monk said nothing, but his thoughts were loud. Why did the master do that? We're monks. We've taken vows to avoid contact with women. How could he carry her like that and say nothing? Eventually, unable to hold it in any longer, the younger monk blurted out, "Master, as monks, we're not supposed to touch women, are we?" The elder replied calmly, "That is correct." "So why did you carry that woman across the river?" The older monk smiled. "I put her down hours ago," he said. "Why are you still carrying her?" Silence fell again, but this time it was a silence filled with understanding. That is the power of this story. In just a few lines, it reveals something we all struggle with. We carry things long after they are over, grudges, regrets, guilt, arguments we had yesterday, mistakes we made years ago, people who hurt us, moments we wish we could undo. We replay them over and over in our minds. We drag them through every conversation, every relationship, every decision. We let them color how we see the world, how we see ourselves. But the truth is, they're already gone, just like the woman at the river. The only place they exist is in your mind. In Buddhist psychology, this mental clinging is called upadana. Attachment. We don't just experience pain, we attach to it, we identify with it, we rehearse it, we become the story. But clinging is not the same as remembering. Clinging is a refusal to release. And that refusal, conscious or unconscious, is what keeps suffering alive. Think about it. What are you still carrying? What memory, what name, what failure or fear, and how long have you been holding it? A week? A year? Your whole life? Now ask, who would I be without it? Most people fear that question because we don't realize how much of our identity is built on the past, on pain, on who hurt us, on what went wrong. But the Buddha taught that liberation is not found by fixing the past. It's found by no longer carrying it. He once asked a group of students, if someone sets down a heavy rock, is there anything else they need to do to be free of its weight? No, the students replied. Exactly, he said, you simply set it down. You don't have to resolve every detail. You don't need the other person to apologize. You don't need to fully understand why. You just need to stop holding it. Let go, not because the past didn't matter, but because it's already gone. Letting go is not forgetting. It's not denial. It's presence. It's recognizing that this moment is not the same as that one. The older monk could carry the woman across the river because he had no attachment, no judgment, no story. He acted with compassion and then moved on. The younger monk, despite doing nothing physically, carried her far longer. He carried her in his mind. And that's where most of our burdens live, not in our hands, but in our thoughts. When you live in the past, you relive the pain, you reinforce the wound, and worst of all, you miss the life that's happening right now. There's an old saying that forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past. That might sound sad, but it's actually liberating. Because when you stop trying to fix what already happened, you free up energy. Energy to love, to breathe, to create, to live. The past will always be part of your story, but it doesn't have to write your future. The woman at the river, she's gone. The rain has stopped. The path is clear. You're still walking. So why are you still carrying her? Here's your invitation. Close your eyes and ask yourself, gently, what am I still carrying? Name one thing. Don't judge it. Just see it. And then breathe. Picture setting it down, like a bag you no longer need, and walk forward. Just a few steps without it. Notice how that feels. That is the beginning of freedom. Story 5. The Buddha's Alms Bowl, a lesson on compassion and equality. In ancient India, it was common to see monks walking barefoot through villages at dawn. They carried nothing but a bowl, no money, no possessions. They didn't cook. They didn't ask for specific foods. They simply received what was offered, gratefully, silently, and without preference. This was not just a ritual, it was a practice in humility, in surrender, in faith. The bowl was both literal and symbolic. It represented the monk's trust in life, in the goodness of others, and in the path itself. The Buddha himself followed this tradition. Even after becoming an awakened one, even as people bowed before him and kings invited him to palaces, he still walked with his alms bowl. From rich to poor, he accepted food from all. One morning, the Buddha entered a village where the caste system ruled every interaction. The higher castes were honored. The lowest caste, those born into poverty and manual labor, were treated as untouchable. Literally, people would walk around them in the street, avoid eye contact, consider them impure by birth. On this morning, the Buddha received food not from a wealthy merchant, but from a poor woman who lived on the outskirts of the village. Her clothes were worn, her hands calloused. She offered him a simple rice gruel, barely enough to be called a meal. And the Buddha accepted it with both hands, bowing deeply. He ate it with full gratitude, in full view of all. When asked later why he accepted food from someone considered impure, the Buddha said, "It is not the status of the giver that makes the offering pure, it is the heart behind it." That one act sent ripples through the village. The so-called untouchables were seen, honored, and embraced as equals, not because they changed, but because the lens through which they were seen had shifted. The Buddha didn't teach equality through theory. He practiced it in silence, through action, through a bowl of humble rice. This story holds immense power even today, because we too often judge people by their surface, by their clothes, their background, their job, their social media presence, their accent. We create a hierarchy of worth without realizing it. We listen to some voices and tune out others, not because of truth, but because of image. But Buddhist practice reminds us that all beings are equal in suffering and equal in potential. A billionaire and a beggar both bleed. They both love. They both fear. And they both die. When we understand this, not just conceptually, but deeply, we stop looking down on others. We also stop looking down on parts of ourselves. The woman who gave the Buddha food didn't have wealth, but she had sincerity. She had generosity. She had love, and that's all that mattered. So often we think we have to be perfect before we're worthy. We think we have to fix ourselves before we can serve or give or love. But the truth is, your heart is already enough. Compassion doesn't require credentials, only presence, only sincerity. The Buddha didn't need a feast. He needed truth. And the simplest bowl of rice, offered with kindness, was more nourishing than gold. There's a quote from the Dhammapada: "Not by birth does one become lowly, not by birth does one become noble. By actions one becomes lowly, by actions one becomes noble." It's what you do with your life that matters, not where you started, not who approves, but how you show up. With what heart? What intention? Imagine if we lived that way. If we saw every person not through the lens of comparison, but through the eyes of compassion, what would change, not just in society, but in your own heart? What if today you looked at a stranger, not with suspicion or indifference, but with gentle curiosity? What if you offered a silent blessing instead of a silent judgment? What if you saw the Buddha not just in monks or statues, but in the cashier, the janitor, the person who annoyed you this morning? This is how we practice equality, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. And it starts with a bowl and a choice to receive and to give without separation. Today, carry an invisible alms bowl in your mind. Approach each person you meet as if you're receiving something sacred from them, whether it's a smile, a glance, or even a moment of shared space. And in return, offer something simple, a thank you, a kind word, or just presence. It doesn't have to be big, it just has to be real. Because every moment of connection, no matter how small, is a step toward a more compassionate world. Story 6. The second arrow, a lesson on emotional suffering and mindfulness. There's a story from the Buddha that has been told for over 2,000 years. A teaching so simple yet so powerful that it remains one of the clearest explanations of human suffering. One day the Buddha asked his disciples, "If a person is struck by an arrow, is it painful?" The monks nodded. "Yes, of course." Then he asked, "If that person is then struck by a second arrow, is it even more painful?" Again they nodded. And then the Buddha said, "In life, we cannot always control the first arrow. That is the pain of existence. The body ages, illness comes, relationships change, people die, accidents happen, the unexpected arrives. But the second arrow, that one we shoot ourselves, that is the pain we create by how we react to the first. This is the arrow of the mind. The stories, judgments, resentment, self-blame, fear, or regret we layer on top of what has already happened. Imagine you lose your job. That's the first arrow. Painful, difficult, maybe even frightening. But then comes the second arrow. I'm a failure. I'll never recover. No one will respect me now. Or imagine someone you love leaves. That's the first arrow. Grief, heartbreak, confusion. Then comes the second. I wasn't enough. They betrayed me on purpose. I'll never trust again. The second arrow is optional, but most of us don't even realize we're doing it. We've been conditioned to believe that our thoughts are facts, that our judgments are truth, and that our inner critic is somehow protecting us. But the second arrow is not protection, it is prolonged suffering, it is re-injury, and it often hurts more than the original wound. This teaching isn't about pretending the first arrow doesn't hurt. Pain is part of being human. Sadness, disappointment, anger, grief, these are natural. We don't avoid them, we acknowledge them. We feel them fully, but we don't need to build a home inside them. We don't need to add suffering to pain. In mindfulness practice, this is one of the first things we learn, the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is what happens. Suffering is the resistance to what happens, the judgment of what happens, the inner war we start when we refuse to feel what is already here. You stub your toe. Pain. You say, I'm such an idiot. Why am I always so clumsy? That's the second arrow. You're late for an appointment. That's the first arrow. You spiral into, I'm unreliable. People will be mad at me. I always mess up. That's the second. And it goes on. Our minds are fast, and the second arrow often comes before we even notice the first. But here's the good news. With awareness, we can stop. We can interrupt the pattern. We can say to ourselves, this is painful, and that's enough. We can allow the original emotion to rise without shame, without defense, and meet it with compassion. There's a practice in Buddhism called naming what's here. When a strong feeling arises, you simply say inwardly, this is sadness, this is fear, this is frustration. That simple act of naming helps you step out of the spiral. You're no longer drowning inside the emotion, you're witnessing it, you're holding it. And that changes everything. Because when you can see it, you don't have to become it. You can tend to your pain without adding more, like cleaning a wound gently instead of tearing it open again. This teaching is especially useful when dealing with shame, because shame is often just a series of second arrows we've carried for years. We feel pain, and then we make ourselves wrong for having it. We suffer, and then judge ourselves for suffering. But the Buddha's words offer us an invitation. When pain comes, stop at the first arrow. Feel it fully. Breathe with it. It's the urge to turn it into a narrative about your worth. Because you are not your mistakes. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness that notices all of it. The one who feels, but is not defined by feeling. The one who hurts, but also heals. So the next time you experience pain, pause, place your hand gently on your chest, and say, this is the first arrow, I will not shoot the second, and see how different life becomes. Story 7. The Overflowing Teacup, a lesson on beginner's mind and inner space. There's a well-known Zen parable about a professor who came to visit a master in search of spiritual insight. The professor was well-read, confident, and full of his own ideas about Buddhism. He had studied the texts, attended lectures, and even taught Eastern philosophy at a university. When he sat down with the Zen master, he began speaking at length, offering theories, quoting scriptures, comparing schools of thought. The master listened patiently and then offered the man a cup of tea. He began pouring. The professor held out his cup as the master filled it to the brim. But the master didn't stop. He kept pouring. Tea spilled over the edges onto the floor and into the professor's lap. It's full, the professor exclaimed. It can't hold anymore. The master nodded. Exactly, he said. You are like this cup, full of your own opinions, assumptions, and conclusions. How can I show you the truth unless you first empty your cup? That is the heart of this story. Wisdom cannot be poured into a mind that already believes it knows. Growth is not possible when we cling to the illusion of certainty. The beginner's mind, the mind that is open, curious, humble, is the fertile ground where transformation takes place. This doesn't mean you have to erase everything you've ever learned. It means you approach each experience as if you know nothing for sure. It means you create space, because space is where new insight enters. The Buddha himself refused to answer many philosophical questions. When asked about the origin of the universe or the metaphysical nature of the self, he remained silent. Not out of ignorance, but because he knew those answers were not the point. He wasn't interested in filling minds with more concepts. He was interested in freeing them. And sometimes the first step to freedom is letting go of what you think you know. Think of how often we carry around opinions like armor. We defend them, we polish them, we impose them onto others. But very rarely do we ask, are these beliefs helping me live with more peace, with more presence, with more compassion? Or are they keeping me stuck, closed off, reactive, rigid? Beginner's mind is not just for monks or scholars. It's for all of us. It's what allows a child to marvel at a butterfly, what helps an artist start a blank canvas without fear, what allows you to meet another person, not as a category, but as a mystery. Every moment you live is unlike any before. Every breath, every sound, every conversation is brand new. But if your mind is already full of assumptions, of past stories, of expectations, you miss it. You don't hear what's being said. You only hear what you expect. You don't see what's in front of you. You see your projection of it. And that is the greatest barrier to awakening. Not ignorance, but pretense. Thinking you already know. The Zen tradition reveres the idea of not knowing. Not as confusion, but as openness. The mind that doesn't rush to label or conclude is the mind that can truly listen. That's why meditation isn't about thinking harder. It's about watching your thoughts, letting them rise and pass without clinging. And in that space, something deeper emerges: stillness, clarity, insight. So how do we practice emptying the cup? Start by noticing when your mind is closed, when you're certain you're right, when you're quick to dismiss or argue or label. And in those moments, pause. Ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? Or better yet, what else is possible here? You'll be amazed at how freeing that question can be. Beginner's mind also means letting go of who you think you are. The roles, the titles, the self-image you've spent years building. Not to abandon your identity, but to loosen your grip on it. Because maybe, just maybe, there's something beyond your current definition. Maybe there's a part of you that's not afraid to not know. That welcomes mystery. That trusts life enough to not control it. In truth, we are all beginners. No matter how much we've learned, no matter how far we've come, each day asks something new of us. Each person teaches us something if we let them. Each breath is a chance to begin again, but only if we're empty enough to receive it. So let your cup be empty, not because you lack, but because you're ready. Ready to listen, ready to learn, ready to see, not what you expect, but what's actually here. Story Chapter 8. The Richest Beggar, a lesson on contentment and inner wealth. There was once a man who lived beneath a tree at the edge of a village. He wore tattered clothes, owned nothing but a wooden bowl, and slept on a straw mat. To the outside world, he was a beggar, poor, unimportant, invisible. But those who passed him often paused. There was something in his face, a deep calm, a quiet smile, eyes that seemed to look at you and through you at the same time. Children liked to sit near him. Strangers told him their secrets. And while others rushed through their lives, chasing money, praise, or status, he sat with the sun, the breeze, and the sound of birds as his companions. One day a wealthy merchant came to the village. Dressed in fine robes with horses and servants behind him, he noticed the beggar and scoffed. "What a waste of life," he muttered. "If I lost all my fortune, I suppose I'd end up like you." The beggar looked up and smiled. "If you lost all your fortune," he said, "you would still be poor." The merchant blinked, confused. "And you? Sitting there in rags? You think you're rich?" The beggar didn't argue. He simply picked up his bowl, drank a sip of water from the stream nearby, and said, "I have everything I need." The merchant left, unsettled. That night he couldn't sleep. The beggar's words echoed in his mind. He had gold, land, employees, a house full of furniture and fine art. But he also had fear. Fear of loss, of betrayal, of aging, of death. He realized his wealth hadn't brought him peace. It had brought him worry. The beggar, on the other hand, had no fear of thieves, no need to impress, nothing to ensure, nothing to prove. He had less, but he also had less to lose. In the morning, the merchant returned to the tree and asked, "How are you not afraid of being poor?" The beggar replied, "Yeah, because poverty is not the absence of things. It's the absence of gratitude. And I am full." That is the heart of this story. In a world that measures success by accumulation, the beggar reveals a different truth. Real wealth is internal. It is measured not by how much you have, but by how little you need to feel whole. The Buddha spoke of this often. He taught that craving, not poverty, is the true source of suffering. It's not what we lack that hurts us. It's the endless wanting, the belief that something more will finally make us happy. But happiness built on conditions is always fragile. It depends on things staying the same. And in a world of constant change, that kind of happiness is doomed. The beggar's joy was not dependent on circumstances. It came from presence, from simplicity, from knowing how to be with what is. He understood that contentment is not complacency. It doesn't mean we don't strive or grow. It means we don't postpone our peace. We don't wait until the debt is paid, or the body is thinner, or the house is bigger to finally feel okay. We choose to feel okay now. That's the miracle. That's the wealth that no one can steal. In Buddhist monastic life, renunciation isn't punishment. It's freedom. Letting go of excess allows space for insight. Owning less means you carry less. And when the mind is uncluttered, the heart opens. The beggar's bowl is symbolic. It's empty, but also ready to receive. It doesn't hoard, it doesn't cling. It welcomes whatever comes and lets go when it passes. That's how we're meant to live. Not in poverty, but in spaciousness. Spaciousness of mind, spaciousness of heart. So ask yourself, what defines your wealth? Is it the number in your bank account or the peace in your breath? The house you own or the silence you can sit with? The beggar reminds us, you can have everything and still be poor, or have almost nothing and be deeply, joyfully full. Because when gratitude is your currency, you are always rich. And when contentment is your home, you are always safe. So today, live simply. Appreciate what's already here. Drink your tea slowly. Listen to the wind. Let yourself feel full. Not from having more, but from needing less. Story 9. The Silence of the Buddha, a lesson on wisdom beyond words. There's a story that has puzzled and inspired seekers for centuries. One day the Buddha was gathered with his disciples, and they expected him to give a teaching, a sermon, a discourse, a sutra. But instead of speaking, he simply held up a flower, a delicate lotus, freshly picked, its petals still glistening with dew. The crowd waited. Seconds passed, then minutes. But the Buddha said nothing. He just sat there, gently holding the flower between his fingers, in complete silence. Some in the crowd grew confused, others impatient. What kind of teaching was this? Was there some hidden meaning in the gesture? Was it a test? But one disciple, Mahakashyapa, looked at the Buddha and began to smile. Just a soft, knowing smile. And in that moment, the Buddha nodded. A silent acknowledgement passed between them. And then the Buddha spoke just one sentence. I possess the true Dharma I, the marvelous mind of nirvana, the true form of the formless, the subtle Dharma gate, not established upon words or letters, but transmitted outside of scriptures. And I now hand it to Mahakashyapa. That was it. That moment became the origin story of the Zen tradition, a lineage passed not through texts or chants, but through direct, wordless understanding. The flower was the teaching, the silence was the gateway, the smile was the realization. In the modern world, we are drowning in words. We analyze, explain, justify, compare. We scroll through quotes, podcasts, books, comment sections. But the deepest truths, the ones that liberate, that awaken, that shift something at the level of being, are often beyond what language can hold. Words are useful, but they are limited. They point, but they are not the thing itself. As the Zen saying goes, don't mistake the finger pointing to the moon for the moon. Language carves up reality into names and forms, but truth, real truth, is whole. It doesn't need to be described. It needs to be experienced. Silence allows for that. Silence is not empty. It is full of presence. It's the space where wisdom unfolds, not as an idea, but as a direct knowing. Have you ever sat with someone you love and no words were needed? Or stood before a vast mountain, or looked into the eyes of a dying parent and realized that nothing you could say would do justice to what you felt? That is the kind of silence we're speaking of here. Not awkward, not passive, but sacred. The Buddha's flower was not a puzzle to be solved. It was an invitation to perceive differently, to feel the teaching instead of intellectualizing it. Mahakashyapa didn't figure it out. He simply saw, and that seeing required no explanation. In meditation, we return to this silence. We stop narrating, we stop solving. We stop seeking. And in that quiet, the mind settles, the heart opens, insight arises, not because we force it, but because we finally create space for it. Silence is also humility. It means recognizing that not everything needs to be said, that sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is simply hold space, to listen, to witness, to be. The Buddha knew that speech has its limits, that concepts can become cages, that too many words can clutter what is actually very simple: presence, awareness, aliveness. He trusted that if a disciple was ready, a single gesture, a flower, was enough. And if they weren't ready, no amount of explanation would make a difference. So he chose silence. And in that silence, a lineage was born, one that continues to this day, not through dogma, but through practice, through direct experience, through quiet moments when something shifts deep within and you realize there's nothing more to add. That is the moment of awakening. Not when you understand more, but when you finally stop needing to understand. When you let go into the mystery, into the now, into the stillness that was always waiting. So today, make room for silence. Let it teach you. Sit without needing to fix or define or explain. Look around, not with commentary, but with presence. And you may find that in the space where words fall away, truth begins to bloom. Quietly, like a lotus in the morning sun. Store 10. The Lotus in the Mud. A lesson on transformation through suffering. The lotus is one of the most powerful and enduring symbols in Buddhism. Delicate, radiant, and serene, it floats untouched on the surface of murky ponds. Its petals open toward the sun, pure and beautiful. But what many people forget or never realize is that the lotus only grows in mud, not in clean water, not on dry ground, in thick, dark, decaying mud. That's where it roots. That's where it finds its strength. And that, the Buddha said, is how enlightenment works. We don't awaken by avoiding suffering. We awaken by transforming it. Just as the lotus pushes through the mud to reach the light, we too are asked to move through our pain, our confusion, our fear, not with resistance, but with deep presence and compassion. The mud is not a mistake. The mud is the path. There's a teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh: no mud, no lotus. It means exactly what it sounds like. Without hardship, there is no growth. Without darkness, no depth. Without suffering, no understanding. But so many of us spend our lives trying to escape the mud. We think, well, if I could just fix this pain, solve this problem, get rid of this sadness, then I'll be okay. We search for happiness in avoidance, but avoidance only prolongs the pain. The more we fight the mud, the deeper we sink. But if we learn to sit with it, to breathe into it, to explore it gently, to feel it without judgment, it begins to change. Not because the mud becomes cleaner, but because we become more open, more grounded, more real. The lotus doesn't judge the mud, it simply grows through it. And in doing so, it becomes a symbol not just of beauty, but of resilience. You too have mud in your life. Perhaps it's grief that hasn't fully moved, or shame that lingers, or anger that erupts without warning, or loneliness that visits in the quiet hours. These are not signs of failure. They are your soil. They are what root you into being fully human. The Buddha himself experienced profound suffering before he awoke. He left his palace not to escape life, but to understand it. And what he found was this: that suffering is not the end of the path, it is the beginning. Because when we suffer consciously, without blame, without escape, we see into the heart of things. We see that everything changes, that everything is interconnected, that we are not alone. And in that seeing, something softens, something opens. That is the first bloom. In meditation, we often sit with whatever arises, whether it's comfort or discomfort, joy or sadness. We learn not to run, we learn to stay. And in staying, we build the strength to grow. The lotus doesn't need perfect conditions to thrive. It needs depth, it needs darkness, it needs time. So do you. Don't rush your healing. Don't compare your journey. Don't judge your mess. Sit in the mud. Trust it. Trust that this, too, is part of your unfolding. One day you will look back on the things you thought would break you and realize they made you. They formed your roots. They gave you the strength to rise. And when you bloom, because you will bloom, it won't be in spite of the mud. It will be because of it. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by life's challenges, place your hand over your heart and say, "No mud, no lotus." Say it again, slowly. Feel the truth of it. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are growing. And the mess you are in is not blocking your path. It is becoming your path. Let it be sacred. Let it be enough. Let it be the very soil that holds your awakening. And now we return to stillness. After 1 hour of stories, reflections, and quiet invitations, it's time to gently let everything settle. What remains is not the words, but the space between them. You've just walked through 10 sacred gates. Each story was a mirror, revealing not something new, but something already living within you. The broken cup taught you to hold life with tenderness, not attachment. The snake in the tube reminded you that much of our fear is born not from reality, but from the mind's misperception. The finger pointing to the moon asked you to look past form and into truth. The woman at the river showed you that real letting go is not about forgetting, but about no longer carrying what no longer serves. The alms bowl of the Buddha taught that the smallest act, when offered with sincerity, holds immeasurable value. The second arrow revealed that pain is natural, but suffering is often our own creation, and awareness is the way out. The overflowing teacup reminded you that humility makes learning possible, and that true wisdom begins when we empty what we think we know. The richest beggar showed you that contentment is not something to chase, it's something to recognize already here. The Buddha's silence showed that the deepest truths are often wordless, and that presence itself is the highest teaching. And the lotus in the mud revealed the most important lesson of all, that your suffering, your darkness, your difficulty is not in the way. It is the way. These are not just stories, they are practices, seeds. Let them sink into the soil of your daily life. Let them become the way you speak, the way you pause, the way you forgive, the way you return to your breath when the world begins to shake. And if even one story helped you breathe a little deeper or feel a little lighter, carry it forward. Not as a rule, but as a companion. Share it if you wish. With someone who needs stillness or with the part of yourself that forgets. And if this podcast became a quiet moment of peace in your day, know that you're welcome here, always. If it moved you, you may share it, revisit it, or simply carry its silence with you. You don't need to become someone else. You only need to remember who you are when you're fully present. That is the version of you that already knows, the one who can sit in the dark and still bloom. So take one final breath, in and out. You don't need to remember every story, just remember how you felt while listening. That feeling, that presence, that peace is the lotus already opening.